Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe for more. The Trial by Franz Kafka. Chapter 10. End. Page 264. The evening before K's 31st birthday, it was about 9 o'clock in the evening, the time when the streets were quiet. Two men came to where he lived. In frock coats, pale and fat, wearing top hats that looked like they could not be taken off their heads. After some brief formalities at the door of the flat when they first arrived, the same formalities were repeated at greater length at K's door. He had not been notified they would be coming, but K sat in a chair near the door, dressed in black as they were, and slowly put on new gloves which stretched tightly over his fingers and behaved as if he were expecting visitors. He immediately stood up and looked at the gentleman inquisitively. "You've come for me then, have you?" he asked. The gentleman nodded. One of them indicated the other with the top hand now in his hand. K told them he had been expecting a different visitor. He went to the window and looked once more down at the dark street. Most of the windows on the other side of the street were also dark already, many of them had the curtains closed. In one of the windows on the same floor where there was a light on, two small children could be seen playing with each other inside a playpen, unable to move from where they were, reaching out for each other with their little hands. Page 265. "Some ancient, unimportant actors, that's what they've sent for me," said K. to himself, and looked round once again to confirm this to himself. "They want to sort me out as cheaply as they can." K suddenly turned round to face the two men and asked, "What theater do you play in?" "Theater?" asked one of the gentlemen, turning to the other for assistance and pulling in the corners of his mouth. The other made a gesture like someone who was dumb, as if he were struggling with some organism causing him trouble. "You're not properly prepared to answer questions," said K and went to fetch his hat. As soon as they were on the stairs, the gentleman wanted to take K's arms, but K said, "Wait till we're in the street, I'm not ill." But they waited only until the front door before they took his arms in a way that K had never experienced before. They kept their shoulders close behind his, did not turn their arms in but twisted them around the entire length of K's arms and took hold of his hands with a grasp that was formal, experienced and could not be resisted. K was held stiff and upright between them. They formed now a single unit so that if any one of them had been knocked down, all of them must have fallen. They formed a unit of the sort that normally can be formed only by matter that is lifeless. Whenever they passed under a lamp, K tried to see his companions more clearly, as far as was possible when they were pressed so close together, as in the dim light of his room this had been hardly possible. "Maybe they're tenors," he thought as he saw their big double chins. The cleanliness of their faces disgusted him. Page 266. He could see the hands that cleaned them, passing over the corners of their eyes, rubbing at their upper lips, scratching out the creases on those chins. When K noticed that, he stopped, which meant the others had to stop too. They were at the edge of an open square, devoid of people but decorated with flower beds. "Why did they send you, of all people?" he cried out, more a shout than a question. The two gentlemen clearly knew no answer to give. They waited, their free arms hanging down, like nurses when the patient needs to rest. "I will go no further," said K. as if to see what would happen. The gentlemen did not need to make any answer. It was enough that they did not loosen their grip on K and tried to move him on, but K resisted them. "I'll soon have no need of much strength, I'll use all of it now," he thought. He thought of the flies that tear their legs off struggling to get free of the flypaper. These gentlemen will have some hard work to do. Just then, Miss Burstner came up into the square in front of them from the steps leading from a small street at a lower level. It was not certain that it was her, although the similarity was, of course, great. But it did not matter to K whether it was certainly her anyway. He just became suddenly aware that there was no point in his resistance. There would be nothing heroic about it if he resisted, if he now caused trouble for these gentlemen, if in defending himself he sought to enjoy his last glimmer of life. He started walking, which pleased the gentlemen and some of their pleasure conveyed itself to him. Page 267. Now they permitted him to decide which direction they took, and he decided to take the direction that followed the young woman in front of them, not so much because he wanted to catch up with her, nor even because he wanted to keep her in sight for as long as possible, but only so that he would not forget the reproach she represented for him. "The only thing I can do now," he said to himself, and his thought was confirmed by the equal length of his own steps with the steps of the two others, "the only thing I can do now is keep my common sense and do what's needed right till the end. I always wanted to go at the world and try and do too much, and even to do it for something that was not too cheap. That was wrong of me. Should I now show them I learn nothing from facing trial for a year? Should I go out like someone stupid? Should I let anyone say, after I'm gone, that at the start of the proceedings I wanted to end them, and that now that they've ended I want to start them again? I don't want anyone to say that. I'm grateful they sent these unspeaking, uncomprehending men to go with me on this journey, and that it's been left up to me to say what's necessary." Meanwhile, the young woman had turned off into a side street, but Kay could do without her now and let his companions lead him. All three of them now, in complete agreement, went over a bridge in the light of the moon. The two gentlemen were willing to yield to each little movement made by Kay, as he moved slightly towards the edge and directed the group in that direction as a single unit. The moonlight glittered and quivered in the water, which divided itself around a small island covered in a densely piled mass of foliage and trees and bushes. Page 268. Beneath them, now invisible, there were gravel paths with comfortable benches where Kay had stretched himself out on many summer's days. "I didn't actually want to stop here," he said to his companions, shamed by their compliance with his wishes. Behind K's back one of them seemed to quietly criticize the other for the misunderstanding about stopping, and then they went on. They went on up through several streets where policemen were walking or standing here and there, some in the distance and then some very close. One of them with a bushy mustache, his hand on the grip of his sword, seemed to have some purpose in approaching the group, which was hardly unsuspicious. The two gentlemen stopped, the policeman seemed about to open his mouth, and then Kay drove his group forcefully forward. Several times he looked back cautiously to see if the policeman was following, but when they had a corner between themselves and the policeman Kay began to run, and the two gentlemen, despite being seriously short of breath, had to run with him. In this way they quickly left the built-up area and found themselves in the fields which, in this part of town, began almost without any transition zone. There was a quarry, empty and abandoned, near a building which was still like those in the city. Here the men stopped, perhaps because this had always been their destination or perhaps because they were too exhausted to run any further. Here they released their hold on Kay, who just waited in silence, and took their top hats off while they looked round the quarry and wiped the sweat off their brows with their handkerchiefs. Page 269. The moonlight lay everywhere with the natural peace that is granted to no other light. After exchanging a few courtesies about who is to carry out the next tasks, the gentlemen did not seem to have been allocated specific functions. One of them went to Kay and took his coat, his waistcoat, and finally his shirt off him. Kay made an involuntary shiver, at which the gentleman gave him a gentle, reassuring tap on the back. Then he carefully folded the things up as if they would still be needed, even if not in the near future. He did not want to expose Kay to the chilly night air without moving though, so he took him under the arm and walked up and down with him a little way while the other gentleman looked round the quarry for a suitable place. When he had found it he made a sign and the other gentleman escorted him there. It was near the rock face. There was a stone lying there that had broken loose. The gentleman sat Kay down on the ground, leant him against the stone and settled his head down on the top of it. Despite all the effort they went to, and despite all the cooperation shown by Kay, his demeanor seemed very forced and hard to believe. So one of the gentlemen asked the other to grant him a short time while he put Kay in position by himself, But even that did nothing to make it better. In the end they left K in a position that was far from the best of the ones they had tried so far. Then one of the gentlemen opened his frock coat, and from a sheath hanging on a belt stretched across his waistcoat he withdrew a long, thin, double-edged butcher's knife which he held up in the light to test its sharpness. Page 270. The repulsive courtesies began once again. One of them passed the knife over K to the other, who then passed it back over K to the first. K now knew it would be his duty to take the knife as it passed from hand to hand above him and thrust it into himself. But he did not do it. Instead he twisted his neck, which was still free, and looked around. He was not able to show his full worth, was not able to take all the work from the official bodies. He lacked the rest of the strength he needed, and this final shortcoming was the fault of whoever had denied it to him. As he looked round, he saw the top floor of the building next to the quarry. He saw how a light flickered on and the two halves of a window opened out. Somebody, made weak and thin by the height and the distance, leant suddenly far out from it and stretched his arms out even further. Who was that? A friend? A good person? Somebody who was taking part? Somebody who wanted to help? Was he alone? Was it everyone? Would anyone help? Were there objections that had been forgotten? There must have been some. The logic cannot be refuted, but someone who wants to live will not resist it. Where was the judge he'd never seen? Where was the high court he had never reached? He raised both hands and spread out all his fingers. But the hands of one of the gentlemen were laid on K's throat, while the other pushed the knife deep into his heart and twisted it there, twice. As his eyesight failed, K saw the two gentlemen cheek by cheek, close in front of his face, watching the result. Like a dog. He said, it was as if the shame of it should outlive him. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, make sure to subscribe for more.